The alien counselors laughed behind their claws and tentacles whenever humans spoke. David Reed kept his head down and his voice small as he read from his prepared notes in the Great Hall of Station Omega. 3 years of this same routine. 3 years of being treated like children who had wandered into adult conversations by mistake. "Honored members," David said softly, his hands shaking just enough to look real. "Earth requests permission to establish a small trade outpost in the Kepler sector." His voice cracked on the word requests, like he was asking for pocket money. The towering Krellin representative Gazak slammed his fist on the council table. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Why do we waste time with these mammals? They offer nothing. They know nothing. They are nothing." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The crystal-bodied Vorthak delegates chimed their approval. The insect-like Zephyrians clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. Even the smaller species who rarely spoke seemed amused by humanity's pathetic display. David nodded quickly and gathered his papers. "Of course, honored Gazak. We understand completely. Perhaps next season we might be worthy of your consideration." More laughter. David hurried from the chamber, his face burning with what everyone assumed was shame. None of them noticed the tiny recording device hidden in his collar or the way his eyes cataloged every security measure, every weapon placement, every tactical detail of the station. Outside the council chamber, David met with his aide Tommy Walsh in a small maintenance corridor. Tommy was officially listed as a janitor, but his real job involved memorizing the defensive capabilities of every ship that docked at the station. "How many Krellin warships in port today?" David asked quietly. 12 heavy cruisers, 40 destroyers, and 1 dreadnought, Tommy replied without hesitation. "The dreadnought has new armor plating, probably their latest quantum steel composite. Should be easy enough to penetrate once we reverse engineer the molecular structure." David smiled for the first time that day. "Send the data home tonight. Make sure it looks like routine communications traffic." Back on Earth, the message arrived at what appeared to be an agricultural processing facility in rural Montana. The building looked ordinary enough from the outside. Grain silos, conveyor belts, trucks coming and going with loads of wheat and corn. But underground, in chambers that stretched for miles beneath the prairie, the greatest military-industrial operation in human history hummed with quiet efficiency. General Patricia Stone reviewed the latest intelligence reports in her command center 300 feet below the surface. The walls around her displayed holographic star maps showing the positions of every major alien fleet in known space. Red dots marked enemy strongholds. Blue lines traced supply routes. Green zones indicated worlds ready for liberation. "The Krellins are getting impatient," she said to her chief of staff, Colonel Mike Torres. "Our spies report they're planning to move against Earth within the year." Mike nodded grimly. "Good. We're almost ready anyway. The shipyards report full production capacity. All stealth systems are operational, and our people scattered throughout alien space are in position. Above ground, the smoke continued to pour from thousands of factories across Earth. Every major city looked like it was choking on industrial pollution. Alien satellites watching from orbit recorded massive environmental damage and shook their metaphorical heads at human stupidity. They had no idea that the smoke screens hid the largest fleet construction project ever attempted by any species. In orbit around Jupiter, invisible to all sensors, the first human dreadnought neared completion. The ship was a masterpiece of reverse-engineered alien technology, improved beyond anything its original creators had imagined. Krellin plasma weapons, but with human targeting systems that made them 3 times more accurate. Vorthak shields, but powered by fusion reactors that could maintain them indefinitely. Zephyrian sensors, but enhanced with human computer networks that could process data at impossible speeds. Admiral Kate Morrison floated in the zero gravity of the construction bay, watching technicians install the final weapon systems. Every Person working on the ship was a volunteer who had spent years preparing for this moment. They knew that humanity's survival depended on their work being perfect. "Final systems check in 24 hours, she announced over the comm system. After that, we wait for the signal. The signal would come from David Reed when the aliens finally made their move. Until then, Earth would continue its performance as a weak, divided planet barely worthy of galactic attention. The deception had cost them everything: pride, reputation, and the respect of every species in known space. But it had also bought them time to build the most advanced military force the galaxy had ever seen. In his quarters aboard Station Omega, David reviewed his final report to Earth. Tomorrow he would deliver humanity's formal response to the Krellin ultimatum. The ultimatum that would demand Earth surrender all its resources and accept slavery or face complete destruction. The ultimatum that would finally give humanity the excuse it needed to drop its mask. Soon, he whispered to himself as he sealed the message. Very soon, they'll learn what humans are really capable of. Across the galaxy, in hidden bases and secret facilities, thousands of humans prepared for the moment when 3 years of careful deception would pay off. They had played the part of weaklings and fools perfectly. They had endured mockery, insults, and threats without complaint. They had smiled and bowed and apologized for existing, but underneath it all, they had been watching, learning, planning, building weapons that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. And when the time came to reveal their true nature, the galaxy would discover that humanity's greatest strength was never their technology or their numbers. It was their patience. The evacuation happened in perfect silence. Every human facility across 3 sectors went dark at exactly the same moment. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply empty. Where thousands of human workers had been going about their daily routines, alien security forces found nothing but vacant corridors and powered-down equipment. On Station Omega, Gazak stormed through the human quarters with a squad of Krellin warriors. The rooms were spotless. Personal belongings were gone. Even the furniture had been removed. It was as if humans had simply vanished into thin air. "Find them!" Gazak roared at his subordinates. "Check every cargo bay, every maintenance shaft, every supply closet. They must be hiding somewhere." But the humans were already gone. While Gazak and his troops searched empty rooms, David Reed and his team were aboard a stealth transport accelerating toward Earth at impossible speeds. The ship's hull was invisible to every sensor the aliens possessed. Its engines left no trace in hyperspace. For all practical purposes, it didn't exist. Back on Earth, President Maria Santos stood in the war room beneath the Colorado mountains. Around her, dozens of screens displayed the positions of human agents throughout the galaxy. One by one, the green lights representing successful evacuations flickered to life. "Last transport clear of alien space," reported General Stone. "All personnel accounted for." Maria nodded and turned to the largest screen in the room. It showed Earth from orbit, still shrouded in the industrial smoke that had hidden their preparations for so long. Begin Phase 2. High above the planet, the smoke began to thin. Not naturally, but in carefully controlled patterns that revealed the truth piece by piece. First came the orbital defense platforms, massive structures that had been assembling in secret for months. Then the shipyards appeared, their stealth fields deactivating to show rows upon rows of completed warships hanging in the void like sleeping giants. The alien monitoring stations scattered throughout the solar system registered the anomalies immediately. Emergency signals flashed across the galaxy as sensor operators tried to make sense of what they were seeing. Where had all these ships come from? How long had they been there? Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Nemesis as her fleet materialized around Jupiter. 200 warships of impossible design hung motionless in space, their hulls gleaming with armor that bent light around it. Each vessel was a work of art and engineering combined, built with the accumulated knowledge of every alien species humanity had encountered. "Fleet reports ready, Admiral," her communications officer announced. "Signal all ships," Morrison replied. "Begin Operation Daybreak." The first target wasn't a military installation or an enemy fleet. Instead, human strike teams hit the hyperspace relay network that connected the galaxy together. These massive structures, built over centuries by cooperative efforts of multiple species, enabled faster-than-light communication and travel across impossible distances. In exactly 14 minutes, humanity destroyed or captured every major relay hub within 60 light-years of Earth. The attacks were surgical, precise, and devastating. Entire sectors found themselves suddenly isolated from the rest of the galaxy, unable to call for help or coordinate responses to the human threat. Commander Rex Dalton led the assault on Relay Station Alpha 7, the most heavily defended node in the network. His stealth destroyer Phantom approached the station completely undetected, her crew moving with the quiet efficiency of professionals who had trained for this moment for years. "Target acquired," reported his weapons officer. "Fusion torpedo, loaded and ready." "Fire," Rex ordered. The torpedo struck the station's power core with mathematical precision. The explosion was contained, controlled, designed to disable rather than destroy. Within minutes, human boarding teams were sweeping through the station, securing prisoners and capturing intact technology. Station Commander Vexitar, a veteran Vorthok officer with 40 years of military service, could barely comprehend what was happening. "This is impossible," he kept saying as human soldiers escorted him to a detention area. "Your species doesn't have this technology. Your ships can't move that fast. Your weapons shouldn't be able to penetrate our shields." The human sergeant in charge of prisoners, a young woman named Beth, who looked barely old enough to be in the military, smiled politely. "Sir, you're going to be treated according to the Geneva Conventions and standard prisoner of war protocols. Medical care will be provided if needed. Would you like something to eat?" The kindness was somehow more unsettling than cruelty would have been. Vextar had expected torture, interrogation, the usual brutality of conquest. Instead, he found himself in a comfortable cell with actual bedding and regular meals. The humans even asked about his dietary requirements and made sure he received food his species could digest safely. But the real shock came when President Santos addressed the galaxy. Every emergency frequency, every communication channel, every piece of alien technology capable of receiving signals suddenly carried the same message. The transmission was crystal clear, impossible to jam or block, reaching every inhabited world simultaneously. "People of the galaxy," Santos began, her voice calm and authoritative. "For 3 years, we have listened to your debates about our extinction. You have discussed the murder of 4 billion human beings as casually as you might plan a harvest. You have treated us as livestock to be managed by your convenience." The image showed Santos standing in what was clearly a military command center, surrounded by displays showing the true extent of human capabilities. Behind her, holographic star maps revealed the locations of every major alien fleet and installation. "You mistook our patience for weakness," she continued. "You confused our diplomacy with cowardice. You assumed that because we asked for peace, we were incapable of war. These were grave miscalculations on your part." Across the galaxy, alien leaders watched in growing horror as their most secure facilities appeared on the human displays. Secret military bases they thought were unknown to outsiders, hidden fleet anchorages in supposedly empty systems, even the private estates where high-ranking officials kept their families safe from political turmoil. "The age of galactic imperialism is over," Santos declared. "No longer will powerful species prey upon the weak. No longer will trade be conducted through exploitation and intimidation. No longer will the many serve the few simply because they lack the strength to resist." The transmission ended with coordinates and a timeline. Every alien government had exactly 72 hours to respond to humanity's terms for ending the crisis. The terms were simple: complete military stand-down, immediate release of all political prisoners, open elections on every world where citizens had been denied representation, and full cooperation with war crimes investigations. The alternative, Santos made clear, was total war against an enemy they had never truly understood. As the message spread through the galaxy, panic set in among the ruling classes. The humans they had dismissed as primitive and harmless had just demonstrated capabilities that exceeded their wildest nightmares. Worse, they had done it with a level of coordination and planning that suggested years of careful preparation. The Krellin Empire mobilized its home fleet immediately. 300 warships, the most powerful military force in known space, prepared to crush this human rebellion before it could spread. War priests blessed the vessels. Commanders swore blood oaths. Warriors sharpened their claws for the ritual slaughter they expected. They had defeated dozens of upstart species over the centuries. Surely these soft mammals would be no different. War leader Gazak stood proud on the command deck of his flagship Blood Hunter as the mighty Krellin armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 300 vessels strong, each one a masterpiece of Krellin military engineering, bristling with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. This was the fleet that had conquered 17 star systems and brought a dozen species to their knees. "Scan for human ships," he ordered his sensor officer. "Show me what these mammals think passes for a navy." The sensor displays lit up with contacts immediately. Not the handful of primitive vessels Gazak expected, but hundreds of ships arranged in perfect battle formations throughout the system. They hung motionless in the void like patient predators, their sleek hulls reflecting starlight in ways that hurt the eyes to look at directly. "Impossible," Gazak muttered. "Where did they get so many ships?" His answer came in the form of weapons fire from directions his sensors insisted were empty space. The human vessels seemed to appear and disappear at will, striking from impossible angles before vanishing again. Krellin shields, designed to stop the most powerful weapons known to galactic science, failed against human torpedoes that phased through solid matter as if it didn't exist. Commander Rex Dalton watched the battle unfold from the bridge of his destroyer Phantom. The ship's stealth systems made it invisible to enemy sensors, while its advanced targeting computers tracked every Krellin vessel with deadly precision. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency, their movements practiced through countless simulations. "Target the lead dreadnought," Rex ordered his weapons officer. "Disable their engines but leave life support intact." "Quantum torpedo ready, sir. Locked on target. Fire." The torpedo struck the Blood Hunter's engine section with surgical precision. The explosion was contained, controlled, designed to cripple rather than destroy. Gazak felt his mighty flagship shudder as power systems failed and artificial gravity fluctuated. Through the viewport, he watched in disbelief as more Krellin ships suffered similar fates. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "Our ships are superior. Our weapons are more powerful. Our armor should protect us." But the humans weren't fighting by Krellin rules. Where Krellin doctrine emphasized frontal assault and overwhelming firepower, human tactics relied on precision and misdirection. They struck weak points with minimal force, achieving maximum effect while conserving their own resources. Every shot was calculated. Every move was planned 3 steps ahead. The battle that followed became known throughout the galaxy as the Massacre at Sol. Not because of massive casualties, though Krellin losses were devastating, but because of how completely one-sided it was. The most powerful fleet in known space was systematically dismantled by an enemy they couldn't even see clearly. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded the human cruiser Defiant as it stalked a group of Krellin heavy destroyers. Her ship's adaptive camouflage made it look like empty space from most angles, while her weapons could punch through Krellin armor like paper. The enemy ships fired wildly in all directions, trying to hit targets they couldn't properly locate. Their "Broadcasting on all frequencies," reported her communications officer. "Demanding that we fight with honor." Lisa smiled grimly. "Patch me through to their commander." The face that appeared on her screen belonged to Sub-Leader Korvac, a scarred veteran who had led boarding parties against civilian transports in the outer colonies. His expression mixed confusion with growing fear as he realized his situation. "Unknown vessel," Korvac snarled. "Cease these cowardly attacks and face us in open battle." "Negative," Lisa replied calmly. "You came here to commit genocide. We're here to stop you. Honor has nothing to do with it." Her next torpedo severed Korvac's ship in half, the explosion contained by human technology that could control even the release of energy. The crew compartments remained intact, life support, systems undamaged. The warriors inside would survive to face justice for their crimes. But the real shock came when the surviving Krellin vessels tried to retreat. Their navigation computers, systems they had trusted for decades, suddenly turned against them. Course corrections led them in circles. Jump calculations produced impossible results. Their own technology had become their enemy. Fleet Commander Thrak, Gazak's second-in-command, stared at his instruments in growing panic. "Navigation is offline. We can't calculate hyperspace coordinates." "Switch to manual backup systems," Gazak ordered. "Already tried, sir. The backups are corrupted too. Something has infected our computer networks." The virus that crippled the Krellin fleet had been planted months earlier during routine trade exchanges. Every time a human delegation had visited Krellin space, they had introduced microscopic changes to computer systems. Tiny modifications that lay dormant until activated by a specific signal. Now those digital seeds bloomed into a plague that turned the enemy's own technology against them. Unable to escape, unable to fight effectively, the proud Krellin armada found itself completely at human mercy. Some commanders chose to activate self-destruct protocols rather than face capture. Others, clinging to desperate hope, tried to surrender with what dignity they had left. Admiral Morrison accepted their surrender with professional courtesy. Krellin prisoners were taken aboard human ships and given comfortable quarters, medical treatment, and surprisingly good food. Their captors treated them with respect, even kindness, which somehow made the defeat even more devastating to Krellin. Pride. "Why do you not torture us?" asked Sub-Commander Vex, a young officer who had expected ritual humiliation as the price of defeat. "Why do you not take trophies from our bodies? This is not how warriors behave." Sergeant Beth Martinez, the same woman who had processed prisoners at the relay station, smiled patiently. "Sir, the Geneva Conventions prohibit torture of prisoners. You'll be held until the end of hostilities, then repatriated to your homeworld. Can I get you anything? Maybe something to read?" The kindness was more unsettling than cruelty would have been. Krellin military doctrine was built around the idea that strength came from the willingness to inflict suffering. Their entire culture celebrated violent dominance as the highest virtue, but these humans fought with devastating efficiency while showing mercy to defeated enemies. It made no sense according to everything the Krellins thought they knew about warfare. Gazak himself, stripped of his command and facing the destruction of everything he had believed about Krellin superiority, asked the question that haunted every surviving member of his crew. How did you become so powerful while appearing so weak? The human officer who interviewed him, Colonel Mike Torres, considered the question seriously before answering. "We never appeared weak, war leader. We appeared peaceful. There's a difference you might want to think about." News of the Krellin defeat spread through the galaxy faster than light. The most feared military force in known space had been destroyed in less than 6 hours by a species everyone had dismissed as harmless. If humans could do that to the mighty Krellin Empire, what did it mean for everyone else? Panic set in among the ruling classes of a dozen worlds. Emergency sessions convened as leaders who had spent centuries in comfortable dominance suddenly faced an existential threat they couldn't understand. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had shattered the foundation of galactic politics itself, and they were just getting started. Trade Minister Velkara felt the first explosion through the crystal matrix of her flagship's hull. The vibration shouldn't have been possible. Vorthak ships were built from living crystal that could absorb almost any impact. But something was, tearing through her merchant fleet like it was made of paper instead of the hardest material known to science. "Damage report!" she commanded, her crystalline voice ringing with harmonics of fear. "Multiple detonations throughout the fleet," her tactical officer replied. "The explosions are coming from inside our own ships, something in the cargo holds, the engine compartments, even the crew quarters." Through her viewport, Velkara watched centuries of accumulated wealth vanish in brief stars of destruction. Every Vorthak vessel that had ever traded with humanity was dying from within, consumed by microscopic devices that had been planted during routine commercial exchanges. The primitive humans had been paying with more than credits and raw materials. They had been paying with invisible weapons. "Incoming transmission!" her communications officer announced. "Broadcasting on emergency frequencies." The message was brief and direct. "Effective immediately. All Vorthak assets are frozen pending war crimes tribunals. Your systematic exploitation of developing species ends now. Survivors will be recovered and treated according to galactic humanitarian law." Velkara's ship shuddered as internal explosions began in her own cargo bays. 3 years of trading with humans. 3 years of cheating. Them on exchange rates, selling them defective goods, and laughing about mammalian stupidity. Now she understood that every transaction had been monitored, recorded, and judged by beings far more intelligent than she had ever imagined. The rescue ships that arrived to collect Vorthak survivors were sleek human vessels that appeared from nowhere with medical teams and emergency supplies. The same species that had been cheated and humiliated in countless trade deals now worked tirelessly to save the lives of their former oppressors. Dr. Amanda Park led one of the rescue teams aboard, Velkara's dying flagship. She found the trade minister trapped in her command chamber, surrounded by failing crystal matrices and toxic gas from damaged systems. Instead of leaving her to die, Amanda risked her own life to extract Velkara to safety. "Why?" Velkara asked, as human medics treated her injuries. "Why save someone who has wronged you so deeply?" Amanda checked her patient's vital signs with professional care. "Because that's what civilized people do. We judge you for your crimes, but we don't let you die for them unless absolutely necessary." In the Zephyrian hive worlds, Queen Zix-9 felt her vast consciousness fragmenting as the quantum links to her drones began severing one by one. For millions of years, Zephyrian society had functioned as a collective mind, with queens controlling billions of workers through biological networking. Now something was cutting those connections, turning her children into individuals. The bioweapon that freed the Zephyrian drones was humanity's most sophisticated achievement. Instead of killing, it liberated. Every drone suddenly found itself capable of independent thought for the first time in its existence. Some kept fighting out of habit, others simply stopped and stared at the stars in wonder. Most chose to surrender and ask questions about this strange new concept called free will. Drone 7742, who had spent her entire life following orders without question, now stood in a human detention center choosing her own name for the first time. Star, she decided after much thought. "I want to be called Star because I have never been allowed to look at them before." The human counselor assigned to help freed drones adjust to individual consciousness smiled encouragingly. "That's a beautiful name, Star. What would you like to do now that you can make your own choices?" Star considered the question carefully. The concept of personal desires was still new to her. "I think I would like to create something beautiful, something that has never existed before. Is that possible?" "Absolutely," the counselor replied. We have art supplies, musical instruments, writing materials, whatever you want to try. Within weeks, freed Zephyrian drones were producing art, music, and literature that astonished both humans and other galactic species. Creativity that had been suppressed for eons suddenly bloomed in countless individual minds. The collective strength of the Zephyrian military dissolved as former warriors discovered the joy of personal expression. But the real revolution began on the worlds where oppressed populations had been watching the news broadcasts. If humans could defeat the Krellin Empire, destroy the Vorthak trade monopoly, and liberate the Zephyrian drones, what did that say about the strength of their own corrupt governments? On the mining world of Nexus Prime, workers who had labored in dangerous conditions for generations suddenly refused to enter the tunnels. If the humans can stand up to the Krellins, declared Shift Supervisor Barry, then we can stand up to the mining consortium. The rebellion spread faster than government forces could contain it. Not violent uprising, but something far more dangerous to the established order. Citizens demanding transparency, accountability, and representation in their own governance. Many of these revolutionaries carried human advisors who seemed remarkably well informed about democratic principles and constitutional law. Governor Maxwell Stone tried to crush the uprising on Nexus Prime with mercenary troops, but discovered that his communications were being jammed and his supply lines cut. Human ships appeared in his system with aid for the rebels and warnings for government forces. "This is an internal matter," Stone protested in his transmission to the human fleet. "You have no right to interfere with our domestic policies," the reply came from Admiral Morrison herself. "When your domestic policies include slavery, child labor, and summary executions, they become everyone's business. Stand down your forces and negotiate with your people, or we'll assume you prefer to resolve this matter through force." Stone's mercenaries, faced with the same human military that had destroyed the Krellin Armada, chose to switch sides. Within days, free elections were being organized on Nexus Prime for the first time in its history. Similar scenes played out on 17 worlds simultaneously. The weak species that Earth had claimed to represent weren't just humanity's allies anymore. They were partners in the greatest political transformation the galaxy had ever seen. Everywhere humans appeared, they brought not just military power, but teachers, doctors, engineers, and political advisors who helped oppressed populations build better societies. The remaining members of the Galactic Council finally began to understand the true scope of humanity's strategy. This wasn't a war of conquest. It was a complete restructuring of galactic civilization itself. The humans weren't trying to build an empire. They were trying to destroy the very concept of empire and replace it with something unprecedented in galactic history: democracy, individual rights, economic justice, fair representation for all species, regardless of military strength. Emergency sessions convened on dozens of worlds as the old order crumbled. Some governments tried to negotiate with the humans. Others prepared for war. A few, recognizing which way the wind was blowing, began implementing reforms before human ships arrived in their systems. But everyone understood that the galaxy would never be the same. The age of species-based hierarchies was ending. The time when strong races could prey on weak ones with impunity was over. A new era was beginning, one where power came not from the ability to inflict suffering, but from the capacity to create prosperity for all. The humans had indeed been watching from the shadows for 3 years, but they hadn't just been building weapons and gathering intelligence. They had been planning for peace, designing institutions that could govern a galaxy of equals, and preparing to teach other species how democracy actually worked. The smoke that had hidden their Warfleet had also concealed something even more dangerous to the established order: hope. The hope that ordinary beings could determine their own destiny among the stars. And once that hope spread beyond Earth, no amount of military force could contain it. 1 year after humanity revealed itself to the galaxy, former war leader Gazak stood trial in the newly established Interspecies Court of Justice on Station Unity, a facility built from the wreckage of the old Galactic Council headquarters. The proud Krellin warrior, who had once demanded humanity's extinction, now faced charges of genocide, slavery, and crimes against sapient life. The courtroom was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Representatives from dozens of species sat together as equals, not divided by military strength or economic power, but united by shared principles of justice. Human legal experts worked alongside reformed alien judges to create a system that treated all beings fairly regardless of their species or background. Prosecutor Sarah Kim presented evidence of Krellin atrocities spanning 3 centuries. Entire worlds strip-mined to extinction, civilian populations enslaved or murdered, children taken from their families to serve as soldiers in Krellin armies. The litany of crimes seemed endless. But when Gazak took the stand in his own defense, something unexpected happened. Instead of denying the charges or claiming military necessity, he spoke with genuine remorse about the path that had brought him to this moment. I believed that strength meant the ability to take whatever I wanted from weaker beings, he said, his voice heavy with regret. I thought mercy was weakness, and compassion was foolishness. The humans have shown me how wrong. I was about everything I once held sacred. The months Gazak had spent in human custody had been unlike anything he had experienced in his military career. Instead of torture and humiliation, he had received education about galactic history, philosophy, and ethics. Human teachers had patiently explained concepts like individual rights, democratic governance, and economic justice. For the first time in his life, he had been exposed to ideas beyond conquest and domination. Judge Patricia Wong, a human legal scholar who had helped design the new court system, listened carefully to Gazak's testimony. Do you believe you deserve punishment for your crimes? Yes, Gazak replied without hesitation. But more than that, I want the chance to make amends. Let me help build something better than the empire I served. His sentence reflected the new galaxy's approach to justice. 20 years of community service helping to rebuild worlds damaged by Krellin aggression. Not imprisonment or execution, but the opportunity to heal the wounds he had helped create. Many observers found the punishment too lenient, but the results spoke for themselves. Gazak became one of the most effective advocates for peace and reconciliation in galactic history. The reformed Galactic Assembly now met on Station Unity in chambers designed for cooperation rather than dominance. Gone were the hierarchical seating arrangements that placed powerful species above weaker ones. In their place stood a circular chamber where every delegate had an equal voice and decisions required genuine consensus rather than the approval of military powers. Ambassador David Reed, no longer playing the role of humanity's stammering representative, delivered the annual State of the Galaxy address to a packed assembly. His transformation from apparent weakling to respected statesman symbolized the broader changes sweeping through civilized space. 2 years ago, this body debated the extinction of my species as if we were discussing weather patterns, he began. Today, we work together to ensure that no sapient being anywhere in the galaxy faces such a threat. This is progress beyond anything our predecessors imagined possible. The statistics he presented painted a picture of unprecedented galactic prosperity. Trade flowed freely between former enemies. Scientific collaboration had replaced technological hoarding. Democratic movements had brought representative government to worlds that had known only tyranny for millennia. Most remarkably, conflicts between species had dropped to the lowest levels in recorded history. Former Trade Minister Velkara, now working as an economic advisor to the Reformed Council, provided data showing how competitive markets had generated more wealth than the old exploitation-based system ever had. We spent so much energy controlling resources that we never learned how to create abundance, she admitted during her presentation. Human economic principles have made every participating world more prosperous than we dreamed possible. The transformation wasn't limited to politics and economics. Cultural exchange flourished as species that had viewed each other as enemies or competitors began to appreciate their differences. Zephyrian art, created by minds freed from collective control, appeared in galleries throughout human space. Krellan military traditions evolved into competitive sports that channeled warrior instincts in constructive directions. Vorthak, crystal singing, became a popular form of entertainment that brought beauty instead of commercial manipulation. Star, the former Zephyrian drone who had chosen her own name, had become one of the galaxy's most celebrated artists. Her sculptures captured the experience of consciousness awakening in forms that moved beings to tears, regardless of their species. She worked in a studio on Earth, surrounded by other freed drones who were exploring their own creative potential. Before the humans liberated us, I was nothing but an extension of the Queen's will, she explained to a reporter documenting the changes in galactic society. Now I create things that have never existed before. Each piece is a celebration of the individual mind. President Santos, addressing the Reformed Assembly on the second anniversary of humanity's emergence, reflected on the irony of their situation. You saw us as weak because we preferred negotiation to conquest, cooperation to domination. You mistook our restraint for inability, our patience for passivity. But true strength isn't about how much damage you can inflict. It's about how much you can accomplish without needing to. The orbital defense platforms that still hung around Earth served as a constant reminder of humanity's military capabilities. The weapons were powered down but unmistakably present, sending a clear message. The new galactic order was protected by beings who had chosen to lead through inspiration rather than intimidation, but who remained perfectly capable of defending what they had built. Dr. Amanda Park, now serving as Director of Interspecies Medical Cooperation, had established healing centers on 43 worlds. Her teams included former enemies working side by side to treat patients regardless of species or political affiliation. The same Vorthak crystal smiths who had once manufactured weapons now grew medical implants that saved lives throughout the galaxy. Medicine has no politics, she explained to a gathering of galactic health ministers. Disease doesn't care about your species or your government. Pain feels the same whether you're human or Krellan or Zephyrian. When we focus on healing instead of hurting, everyone benefits. The transformation of the Krellan homeworld had become a symbol of the new era's possibilities. The planet that had once been the center of a brutal military empire now hosted the galaxy's first University of Peace studies. Former warriors studied conflict resolution alongside beings from species they had once oppressed. Weapons factories had been converted to manufacturing facilities that produced medical equipment, agricultural tools, and educational materials. Commander Rex Dalton, who had led the assault that crippled the Krellan fleet, now taught military ethics at the university. His students included both humans and former enemies who wanted to understand how warfare could be conducted with honor and restraint. The curriculum emphasized protection of civilians, minimization of casualties, and the importance of post-conflict reconstruction. War should be the last resort of civilized beings, he told his classes, and when it becomes necessary, it should be fought to create peace, not to prove dominance. The goal is always to build something better from the ashes of conflict. The economic data spoke for itself. Worlds that had participated in the new democratic and free market systems showed unprecedented growth. Infant mortality had dropped by 60% across participating systems. Educational opportunities had expanded to include previously excluded populations. Even crime rates had fallen as economic inequality decreased and social mobility increased. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in the way different species viewed each other. The old categories of strong and weak races had become meaningless. What mattered now was contribution to the common good, creativity, and willingness to cooperate with others. A Zephyrian artist could command the same respect as a Krellin engineer or a human diplomat. Trade Representative Barry Martinez, a former mining supervisor who had led the rebellion on Nexus Prime, now served as the planet's elected governor. His administration had transformed the world from an exploited resource extraction site into a thriving center of manufacturing and education. The dangerous mines that had killed thousands of workers were being converted into underground cities that provided safe, comfortable living spaces. Democracy isn't just about voting, he explained to visitors touring the transformation. It's about every person having the opportunity to reach their full potential. When you free people from oppression, amazing things become possible. The old Galactic Council building had been converted into a museum documenting the crimes of the Imperial era. School children from dozens of species toured the exhibits, learning about the dark period when strength determined rights and the weak existed only to serve the powerful. The museum's motto, carved in every major galactic language, read simply, "Never again." Admiral Morrison, now serving as commander of galactic peacekeeping forces, maintained a fleet that included reformed vessels from every major species. Former enemies served together on mixed crews, their diverse capabilities combining to create the most effective military force in galactic history. But this fleet's mission was protection, not conquest. We maintain our strength, not to threaten others, but to ensure that no one can threaten the innocent, she explained to new recruits during their graduation ceremony. Every being in the galaxy has the right to live free from fear, oppression, and violence. That's what we're here to protect. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Some worlds resisted change and had to be brought into the new order through economic pressure or limited military intervention. A few species attempted to maintain their old imperial systems in isolation, only to find themselves unable to compete with the prosperity of democratic societies. But 5 years after humanity's emergence, the galaxy had achieved something unprecedented in its history: sustainable peace based on justice rather than fear. Trade disputes were resolved through arbitration instead of warfare. Technological advances were shared freely instead of hoarded for military advantage. Even former enemies had learned to see each other as partners in building a better future. President Santos, now in her final term as humanity's leader, looked out at the stars from her office on Earth and smiled. The smokescreens that had once hidden humanity's preparation for war had given way to clear skies through which the light of democracy shone across the galaxy. Children on 100 worlds were growing up in freedom their parents had never known. The galaxy had learned to respect not just human military prowess, but the principles that guided it. Strength in service of justice. Power tempered by mercy. The wisdom to know when to fight and when to forgive. As night fell over Earth's capital, the lights of the orbital platforms twinkled like distant stars. They were still there, still ready, still capable of defending the new order against any threat. But they had become symbols of hope rather than fear, reminders that sometimes the greatest strength lay in choosing not to use the power you possessed. The age of galactic empire was over. The era of universal democracy had begun. And among the stars, billions of beings slept peacefully, knowing that tomorrow would bring opportunity instead of oppression, cooperation instead of conquest, and hope instead of fear.